नमस्ते भ्राता।
नमस्ते।
कैसे? बहुत दिन बाद।
जी जी जी।
2-3 महीने से तो कोशिश ही कर रहे हैं कि आप आ जाएं, लेकिन 24 घंटे भी कम पड़ रहे हैं
कम पढ़
आपको।
रहे हैं अभी।
तो पहली जो पुस्तक है
जी।
उसका कितना क्या चल रहा है, क्या स्टेटस है, कितनी बिक चुकी हैं?
तो कल ही लेटेस्ट फिगर्स आए हैं। अगस्त से लेके दिसंबर का जो फिगर आया है, आई थिंक अबाउट 31,070 कॉपीज हार्ड कवर के, एंड किंडल वर्जन अबाउट 3,363. So everything put together is about 35,000 or 34,000 copies. And I think this has been the biggest seller for Bloomsbury, at least in the non-fiction category for 2021.
हम्म।
And they're very confident that this will continue until the second book. क्योंकि पांचवा प्रिंट रन था 10,000 कॉपी का, वो भी ऑलमोस्ट खत्म हो रहा है.
हम्म।
छठा प्रिंट रन शुरू हो चुका है, इन द सेंस इट्स गॉन फॉर प्रिंटिंग. So I would say we are looking at 10, 10, 20, so about 50,000 to 55,000 copies, at least by the end of this month,
हम्म।
in terms of sales. I think it's been very positive and heartening because I've got feedback saying ye Angrezi it's so difficult to read. We need dictionary to read this and all that.
हम्म।
But there is also a lot of people who've basically said it's fairly lucid, it's clear. The training of a lawyer has come through as far as the writing and the structuring of the book is concerned, and the way you've marshaled evidence to present your arguments. तो मुझे लगता है that the feedback has been really positive. But the demographic which I'm most interested in, जिनके लिए ये लिखा गया था, I think I stood validated and vindicated in my session at Hansraj on 7th of March. That's 2 days ago. Because the kids there had done their homework. Fantastic questions, very sharp questions, and questions which have a bearing not just on campus politics, but life outside of that. So the tendency to write off this generation, जो कभी कभार होता है, नहीं ये टिकटॉक की जनरेशन है, नहीं हो सकता है, अरे हर जनरेशन में डिस्ट्रैक्शंस हैं, यहाँ पे भी हैं. But perhaps given all the distractions, for somebody to still have an interest in these topics, पढ़ के आना, I think it's a huge credit to this generation. So I'm very, very confident and hopeful of the future, at least based on these reactions.
जो ये सफलता है पुस्तक की, इससे मतलब खुश हैं, बिलो एक्सपेक्टेशन है या एक्सपेक्टेशन से ज़्यादा रहा?
I think it's at this point, my expectations and reality have met each other.
फाइनली।
Finally. And मैंने अपने दिमाग में एक टारगेट रखा तो था that at the very least, that this book should sell about 1 lakh copies. That was my mental target. The publisher wasn't so sure only because of the topic. I said topic एक चीज है, but the other thing is I'm fairly confident of my reach on social media and other platforms. And assuming that even 25 to 30% of people who listen to what I have to say end up buying it, even then I think I will end up reaching that figure. Maybe in a period of 6 to 7 months was my estimate. So August to December, we have sold about 35,000 copies. That's a period of 4 months. And in the last 2 months, Jan and Feb, about 20,000 copies. So you're looking at 55,000 in 6 months. I'm not completely off the mark. I'm okay. And for a book which has been branded academic, heavy, dense, and whatnot, when it competes with Priyanka Chopra's book and Sadhguru's book, I think it has done its job. Amazon के top 5 में ये 2021 का ये blockbuster है. So I think it was number 4 or something for 2021 on Amazon. And if you still look at the daily rankings, which I follow on a regular basis, I keep getting the information from the publisher. We are constantly either in the top 20 or the top 50. And it has been continuously number 1 in the political categories for the last 4.5 to 5 months, almost.
तो ये जो रीच है, ये इसके पीछे क्या कारण लगता है आपको कि जो इतना बड़ा रॉक स्टार टाइप का स्टेटस हो चुका है साई दीपक का?
नहीं, अगर आप if you look at the reception for Vikram Sampath's book or for my book, I've said this before कि audience तैयार है इस information के लिए. I happen to make the statement at Hansraj that the audience was just looking for people who could articulate their own instinctive and intuitive thoughts in a very lucid fashion and make it relatable to them as well as to their detractors, saying this is our position, take it or leave it, and these are the reasons for holding this position. So fortunately my candor during my talks has created a sufficient amount of interest in what is it that I have to say in the book, which goes beyond those talks. Okay. So the idea has been, I think, to present a comprehensive master template of sorts. Because you see, from 2016, ever since I started talking on these subjects, I too was learning. I was uncovering my own layers of ignorance. And especially after the Sabarimala experience, I was exposed to so much of literature on jati, practice and whatnot. No wonder my position before and after Sabarimala has drastically changed when it comes to even caste-related issues. So, therefore, I think there was a certain degree of curiosity. If I was going to say something new or better in the book than what was already in public domain thanks to these speeches. So that was there. 3, I think, when you're on college campuses or in academic departments or in humanities departments, assume for a moment that you show a talk or a speech by someone. The opposite side is going to say, but isne likha kya hai? Whereas he subjected himself to the scrutiny of a peer group or a larger audience. If he's so confident of what he says, let the pen meet the paper. That's where the proof is ultimately. And when it meets, tab jaake pata chalega ki doodh kitna hai, pani kitna hai. And now that it has finally done so, I think the gauntlet has been thrown at the left. That your arrogance and your constant dismissive statements, that the non-left is not capable of producing scholarship, even if I say so myself, I think I've put out a fairly good work product. I can say this now. And the fact that people in strategic departments, both in Bharat and outside, are taking this book very, very seriously. And it has caught the negative attention of post-colonial school leaders and thought leaders like Priyamvada Gopal, who I must be very, very grateful for giving such a fantastic publicity for my book, thanks to her tweets. Clearly shows, I think, the cat has been set among the pigeons. जहाँ पे चुपता है वहाँ पे कांटा लग चुका है. So,
लेकिन इसमें जो रीच है आपकी, उसके पीछे एक ओरेटरी जो है
जी.
उसका भी बहुत बड़ा रोल मुझे लगता है. एक तो कैंडर तो है ही, कंटेंट है
जी.
वो मतलब हम बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो उस तरीके का जैसे लिख सकते हैं, लेकिन आप जिस तरीके से मतलब जो तालियां बजती हैं जब बोलते हैं, तो वो वाली बात भी एक बहुत बड़ा फैक्टर है कि फैन फॉलोइंग जो होती है ना, एक डिफरेंस हो जाता है उसमें. तो उसके पीछे क्या ये जो लॉयरिंग है, वकील हैं, इसके जो स्किल्स हैं वो निखर के आते हैं, या उससे कुछ सीखा है? ये कैसे ओरेटरी कैसे इतनी अच्छी हुई?
इस सवाल का जवाब आत्मस्तुति के बगैर तो हो नहीं सकता है. तो मुझे पता नहीं क्या बोलूं. सो आई ट्राई माय बेस्ट, व्हिच इज आई ट्राई टू कीप इट फैक्चुअल.
बट ऐसे आंसर करो कि जैसे लोग भी अगर कोई मतलब सुन रहे हैं तो वो कैसे इम्प्रूव कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि सब लोग बोलना अच्छा नहीं जानते हैं.
One thing I think that people underestimate. In fact, if you watch this movie, I think what was the movie Avengers का कौन सा movie था before Endgame? Infinity Wars, right?
Ultron
नहीं. The movie Infinity Wars was where Stark dies, and उसके पहले आता है, sorry, Endgame is where he dies, and you have Infinity Wars where Thanos is introduced and all that.
बिल्कुल.
So there is one scene where Thor is sitting on a ship on the way to the star. So he's sitting with his raccoon, and they're on the way to the star because he's lost his Mjolnir, his hammer, and he has to create a new hammer, so he has to go there. So he's just pondering there. And this raccoon realizes that iska mood theek nahi hai, usko he has to pep his spirits and ek pep talk dena padega. Thor says something which I've always related to, and this is the running theme in this series according to me, where he says that anger clarifies your priorities बहुत अच्छी तरीके से. It has, if you channel it properly, it has the tendency to straighten your wiring in a very crystal clear fashion. You can either treat it as an impotent, let's say, ventilation, where all you come out with is simply empty talk. But should you build a dam and should you be able to channel it properly, I think it can achieve wonders. So similarly, I think in the first Avengers movie of 2012, Bruce Banner is about to hit that massive monster that comes about, and then he turns around and tells Natasha Romanoff, you asked me how do I control my anger, and to which, or rather he was responding to Stark, and he says, I'm always angry.
That's my superpower.
Right, that's a super, right? So when you're always angry, you know how to ride the dragon. If you don't know how to get angry, and if it happens only once in a while, that is the time when you end up doing something that you are otherwise not capable of. But if you know how to control that creature and you're constantly angry, then you're only waiting for strategic outlets where you can release it properly. So for me, the ability to speak is a function of my interest in speech, my interest in language, my interest in words, my interest in the power of sound. That I've been a fairly decent speaker ever since my schooling days. That
So it's natural also.
I don't know if that is the case, but
But do you practice?
no, I don't.
Never.
No, I can never. I've been a part of, let's say, dramas and theaters in school. Once in a while, jo annual days mein hota and all that. I was even member of the school parliament and all that. Environment minister, by the way. So, all of that happened. But I don't believe in practicing. I believe in being prepared, which is different from practicing. Which is that you should keep collecting ammunition. You should keep collecting information. And the ability to connect everything that you've read, all the dots, that is most important. So there are two ways of looking at it. You either read only what you think is relevant, or you read everything and make it relevant. These are two different approaches, and I've learned it very early on. Diverse reading, but you should be able to connect everything. That's the only way you can look at it. Because if you're trying to make sense of the elephant and you're trying to identify the elephant, there's no point in just focusing on a certain part. So history, science, economics, whatever is possible, I've tried to do that. So apart from that, वकील का जो ट्रेनिंग होता है आपके नेचुरल इंस्टिंक्ट्स को और थोड़ा शार्प कर देता है और सिस्टमैटिक कर देता है. How do you present something in the shortest possible time if necessary, or the longest possible time if that's what is needed to delay something, to dilate something? Both these skill sets you end up getting. And see, you don't expect any person to know tax law, constitution and everything.
आप अंग्रेजी में शुरू हो गए.
जी so sorry, मैं ट्राई करता हूँ. तो एक बात को किसी भी हालत में सिंप्लीफाई करके कोर्ट के सामने रखना जो है, दैट इज द फंडामेंटल ट्रेनिंग ऑफ एन आर्ग्यूइंग काउंसिल. बिकॉज सब्जेक्ट मैटर एक्सपर्ट्स तो आपको बहुत सारे मिल जाएंगे. आई डेयर से दैट यू विल फाइंड अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल हु आर परहैप्स better qualified than me when it comes to even my own areas of core competence. But the skill set that एक arguing counsel का जो होता है, which is इसको आप reachable कैसे बनाएं, simple कैसे बनाएं, ताकि it hits the nail on the head. And the central point that you wish to make हमेशा audience के दिमाग में बैठ जाना चाहिए. That I think has happened not as a consequence of practice from a speaking perspective, but legal practice. कर करके ये हो जाता है एक stage में. And for the first 7 years since I was part of a certain law firm, I did not want that outfit to bear the brunt of my opinions. मेरे जितने भी opinions हैं, इसका भुगतान किसी और को नहीं करना चाहिए. I will take the responsibility for my opinions. Although they were fairly open to my point of view, I would stay out of it because I was focusing on building my reputation as a competent lawyer. But जब मैं independent गया था जून 2016 में, I had the freedom, even more so, to speak my mind without attracting any flag for anybody else. That I think has significantly helped.
अब जैसे आपने कहा प्रैक्टिस का नहीं, लेकिन कुछ फैक्टर्स होते हैं. जैसे आपने कहा कि आप ड्रामा वगैरह, थिएटर वगैरह करते थे, तो जो पेरेंट्स हैं तो शायद उनको एक लेसन मिलेगा कि क्या करना चाहिए, कैसे रेज करना है बच्चों को, ताकि जो बोलने की क्षमता है, क्योंकि आजकल अगर हम देखें कंटेंट तो ठीक है, लेकिन जो क्षमता है उसको प्रेजेंट करने की, चाहे रिटन फॉर्म में है चाहे बोलने के है, वो एक कला है ना, वो अपने आप को, आपकी स्टैंडिंग को बहुत ऊपर लेके जा सकती है.
जी जी. I think I hope nobody else's parents are put through the trouble of having to rear a child like me, because my reputation all along has been uddand of the first order. Okay, and ad gaya to ad gaya, no matter what. And fortunately, I've been blessed with patient parents, extremely patient parents, who've allowed me to make my own mistakes, who've allowed me to, of course, as parents, they always have concern. Engineering कर दिया, aerospace बनना था, आप कहाँ से वकालत करने चले गए, वकीलों के पास मत जाओ. If somebody enters the realm of either, I mean, they say 7:30 आपका शुरू हो चुका है, अगर आपको डॉक्टर के पास जाना हो या वकील के पास जाना हो, तुम वकालत क्यों करना चाहते हो? Don't do all of this and all that. But after I presented my point of view, they said, ठीक है, करो. You take the responsibility for the outcome. So I think that's one. But most importantly, if anything, I'm really grateful for is values and the grounding and the rooting. So we are not strictly orthodox, but like any other low middle class Hindu family from the south, culture is an integral part. religion is an integral part. ये आपके रूटीन का एक भाग बन जाता है, which you can't separate under any circumstances. So it creates a subconscious filter that जो आपको पता नहीं होता है जब आप बड़े हो रहे हैं. You realize that much later. When circumstances present themselves, परिस्थिति आपके सामने आ जाती है, तब आपका जितना भी ये परवरिश है and all that, it'll kick in. Is this right? Is this wrong? Should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? That you'll realize much later. And that's been the consequence so far.
इसमें जैसे बहुत परिवार ऐसे हैं जहाँ पे बच्चों को जो ट्रेडिशंस हैं,
जी
जो एक बैड वर्ड बन गया है ट्विटर पे, ट्रेड्स बोलते हैं जिनको,
जी,
वो बहुत बड़ा रोल जो मैं देखता हूँ आपके जीवन में रहा है
जी.
लेकिन कई परिवार ऐसे भी होते हैं जहाँ पे बच्चे वो सब देखते हैं और फिर वो एकदम से डीरेसिनेशन एकदम हो जाता है उनका.
जी 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 जी.
वो बहुत सरप्राइजिंग लगता है.
So let me be honest here. I went through a phase where I was not deracinated or alienated or anything, but what is expected of you in terms of your, let's say, duties? I'll be honest here, I don't think it's wrong. जब आपका उपनयन संस्कार हो जाता है, effectively कुछ नित्य कर्म शुरू हो जाते हैं, daily practices आपके शुरू हो जाते हैं. And I wanted to observe each of them as much as possible, but बीच में एक break आ गया था. And after a certain point, when I started taking these causes up, someone actually came up to me and said this within the family. He came and said this. ये सब करके क्या फायदा when you're not able to practice what is expected of you fundamentally, जो आपके basic नित्य कर्म हैं. So नित्य कर्म are so integral to your practice. किसी भी आप वर्ण या जाति के हो, it's almost like brushing your teeth. If you can't forget to brush your teeth, you can't forget to discharge these daily duties, period. That's why it's called nitya karma. And he basically said, try and embrace it. Ek discipline aayega. And I'm grateful to that person for having pushed me in that particular direction. So I don't know whether I'm a trad or a rayata. I don't want to look into these labels. I'm simply asking myself, am I doing at least the basics that are expected of me by a certain dharma? And you will benefit from it because you see, when Swami Vivekananda, I think, was once asked by one of his disciples, I think, how do I just memorize all of this without knowing the meaning? He said, first you memorize. The meaning will reveal itself in time. That has been his approach as far as reading is concerned. Now, of course, there are differences of opinion on whether that's right or wrong or whatever it is, but श्रुति और स्मरण का एक बहुत ही serious impact होता है. That's a very serious tradition in our philosophy and the way we are taught in our knowledge systems in spirituality. First, listen. In fact, if anybody starts Vedadhyan, you're not expected to read. You're expected to listen and absorb. But अभी क्या हो गया है that either people don't have the patience या फिर उच्चारण जो है ठीक से नहीं होता है. So you therefore look at the written word. एंड फिर उसमें से आप डायक्रिटिकल मार्क्स देखते हैं कि ऊपर नीचे कैसे जाता है, इंटोनेशन कैसे जाता है, देन यू डू इट. बट अदरवाइज यू आर एक्सपेक्टेड टू बी शार्प इनफ टू फोकस ऑन द अदर पर्सन्स वॉइस एंड अकॉर्डिंगली मूव अप एंड डाउन. ट्रेडिशनली अभी वेद पाठशाला में आज वही होता है. सो आई ग्रेजुअली गॉट पुश्ड इन दैट पर्टिकुलर डायरेक्शन एंड नॉट अगेंस्ट माई विल.
तो कहीं ना कहीं कोई गाइडेंस देने वाला भी मिल जाना चाहिए. पेरेंट्स तो होते ही हैं
100%,
लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं छूट जाता है वो
100%.
और उसके बाद आपको कोई डायरेक्शन देने वाला होना चाहिए. तो आप भी अगर किसी बच्चे को देखते हैं कि वो कहीं ना कहीं भटक रहा है तो
that's see the thing is this, if I've been grateful for anything in the last 5.5 to 6 years is the kind of brilliant people that I've been surrounded by, who've been kind enough to shower me with their knowledge, push me in the right direction, have taken an interest in my nitya karma. It's an extremely personal thing. लेकिन अगर किसी को लगता है कि ये करना इसके लिए अच्छा होगा given what he is taking up or what he wants to, I think it's nothing but divine grace when someone comes and tells you do this. So I'm open to being corrected by anyone as long as they're able to tell me these are the reasons. And which is why, let's say, when someone tries to be snarky or snide on Twitter or whatever it is, perhaps the human tendency is to focus on the tone. I try and focus on the content unless it crosses a certain line. Assume that there is something worthy of being accepted. Try and open up your mind a bit more. Tone में क्या रखा है? Forget it. After a point, it doesn't make any difference. Ultimately, if you benefit from the point, you forget about the tone altogether.
जी Sai Deepak tone के बारे में बोल.
So I don't want to give the impression that I'm heavily traditional or not. Perhaps I'm wannabe in that particular sense.
जितना चाहिए उतने हो, है ना?
I certainly tried
That
it.
is all it needed, right?
Correct. And not just that, I think one of the things is, I wish I had the traditional training from Veda Pathashalas. I regret not having that. But I think in our generation, parents had their own struggles, because just as the country was going through its own phase of liberalization, economy, and all that, I think that was the standard, or at the microcosmic level, that was more or less the case with most families. Trying to make ends meet, making sure that they get good education, English education, they need to be able to speak English, और ये हर जगह पे हो रहा था. I think the entire society was affected by it. I am just grateful to the gods that despite English education and all that, somehow there is a certain degree of filter I have been given, thanks to others who've basically said, you're making a mistake here, you're making a mistake there, focus on this, focus on that. The temple freedom matters, I got pulled into it by thanks to the guidance of Sri C.S. Vaidyanathan, senior advocate in the Supreme Court, who represented Ram Lalla in the Ram Janmabhoomi case. So I just think I must be grateful for the kind of people I've been surrounded by. More than anything else, that's where my good part, I think, is that I just absorb like sponge.
आपने बोला जैसे कि जो बेसिक इंस्टिंक्ट्स होते हैं
जी
वो एक्सेंचुएट हो जाते हैं जब आप एक लॉयर की ट्रेनिंग होती है.
जी जी जी.
तो आपके कौन से जो इंस्टिंक्ट थे या स्किल्स थे जो मतलब यहाँ पे आने के बाद होन हुए हैं?
तो एक शार्प टंग तो बेसिकली है, सरकाज़म तो है, बट अगर आपने उसको टोन नहीं किया या फिर उसको मॉडुलेट नहीं किया, इट लूजेस इट्स इम्पैक्ट एंड यू एंड अप डेवलपिंग अ नेगेटिव रेपुटेशन. ओके, तो उसको कहाँ पे रोकना है? बिकॉज वन थिंग दैट दे से अबाउट द लीगल प्रोफेशन, स्पेशली लिटिगेशन, इज दैट डिस्क्रेशन इज द बेटर पार्ट ऑफ एडवोकेसी. सो यू शुड रीड द रूम, अंडरस्टैंड कहाँ पे क्या बोलना चाहिए और क्या नहीं बोलना चाहिए. एंड notwithstanding my outspoken nature and candor, very rarely can people fault me for saying something that I regret having said. I say almost 99% of the time exactly what I mean and what I want to. And the heat of the moment rarely takes over my ability to convey what I want to. That comes with training, and that also comes with what I call being a witness to your own action. Which is each time you speak, the first witness and the first audience you're catering to is you getting out of your body and standing on the side and saying, are you doing the right thing? So it's an out-of-body experience that you must go through each time. And you realize that, will you regret having said this later? Are you cutting a sorry figure? Will you be embarrassed by what you just said? Making a factually inaccurate statement is okay, because you can't get facts right always. You must do your research, but once in a while you could be wrong. After, there are multiple versions floating around. But are you at least being measured in what you're saying? So to strike a balance between being measured and that controlled aggression, I think requires a lot of training. It's a dragon that you need to be able to learn to ride slowly.
ये बात जॉर्डन पीटरसन ने भी बोली थी.
Please don't compare me with him, because
नहीं,
बहुत already हो रहा है.
नहीं बिल्कुल, क्योंकि नहीं, ये पर्टिकुलर बात बोली थी कि आदमी को मतलब खूंखार होना चाहिए.
अच्छा, ओके.
और उसके बाद उसको कंट्रोल करके,
हाँ,
मतलब अगर आदमी खूंखार नहीं है तो उसके जीवन का जीने का कोई फायदा नहीं है.
See, I think, again, going back to some pop culture reference, what's his name? Jawagal Srinath was apparently asked by Wasim Akram to consume non-vegetarian to increase his stamina and pace. And Wasim Akram is a young diabetic. He's been a diabetic all along. He used to have insulin shots and then do all this, no? And Jawagal Srinath effectively said, whatever it is, I will not touch non-vegetarian for whatever reasons. I think the reasons are well known. And he continued on his natural talent. I think there was a reflection on this particular incident at a much later point of time by Wasim Akram, and he realized that किसी को तराशने के नाम पे पूरी तरह से उनके बेसिक नेचर को चेंज नहीं कर देना चाहिए. Okay, so your basic aggression must always be given its free rein. You temper it, you channel it, but you don't try and suppress it. Anytime you try and suppress energy, it'll rebound in an extremely nasty fashion with double the force. So try and find ways of moving it. And what you do then is that you try and create stops, which doesn't impede the movement, but only directs that particular movement. So keep channeling it over and over again. I'm 100% sure that if I was not a lawyer where my aggressive instincts are given a certain degree of ventilation and expression, I'm 100% sure that I've taken up something else. I actually wanted to apply for the armed forces. I'd applied for the NDA also. So kahin na kahin to ye energy release hona hi tha.
तो एरोस्पेस इंजीनियर बनते तब क्या करते?
पता नहीं, साइड में बॉक्सिंग शुरू कर लेता।
हाँ, तो बुक के ऊपर बात करते हैं
जी
थोड़ा,
जी जी
क्योंकि
जी
उसमें वर यू सरप्राइज कि कुछ लोगों के जो कमेंट्स थे, या मैं कहूँगा कि उनका थोड़ा स्क्रू ढीला हो गया था आपकी बुक के पॉपुलैरिटी से, तो वो भी डीकोलोनियलिटी के खिलाफ बोलने लगे।
नहीं, टू बी फेयर एंड
कुछ कुछ जेन्युइन क्रिटिसिज्म भी
जी जी
उनके
जी
रहे होंगे। उसमें से दो की बात करते हैं, क्योंकि ज़्यादा करेंगे तो इसी में समय बीत जाएगा।
जी जी
तो एक ये था कि आप डीकोलोनियलिटी की बात करते हो,
जी जी
तो उसमें तो तालिबान है, जैसे वुमेन राइट्स हैं इंडिया
राइट राइट
में, अब वो तो अब सबका इक्वल राइट्स मिल रहे हैं।
जी जी
वुमेन जो आज का उनका मतलब सिचुएशन है, दैट इज़
राइट
मच
राइट
बेटर।
राइट राइट
तो क्या आप डीकोलोनियलिटी का मतलब है क्या उनको आप पीछे ले जाओगे? तो इस तरीके की बातें हुई। डीकोलोनियल तो तालिबान भी है,
जी
तो क्या उनका वो ठीक है? डाइवर्सिटी के नाम पे क्या सबको सब कुछ करने देना चाहिए? क्या
राइट
लिमिट्स होनी चाहिए?
राइट
तो ये वैलिड कंसर्न था,
राइट।
तो इस पे थोड़ा एड्रेस कर दीजिए।
सो फर्स्ट क्लैरिफिकेशन इंडिविजुअल्स पे दे देता हूँ, बिकॉज आई थिंक इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। मैंने कभी ये लिख के इस पुस्तक को नहीं लिखा था कि इसका यूनिवर्सल और यूनानिमस अप्रिसिएशन होगा, नॉट पॉसिबल एट ऑल। एंड सेकेंड, आई एम नेवर गोइंग टू बी द वन टू से दैट दिस बुक इज परफेक्ट इन ऑल रेस्पेक्ट्स, बट आई विल सर्टनली से इट रिफ्लेक्ट्स माई कमिटमेंट एंड सीरियसनेस। टू, जब भी ट्विटर या सोशल मीडिया पे हम कुछ कह देते हैं, एंड समटाइम्स आई डोंट थिंक वी रियलाइज दैट अगर आमने सामने अगर मुलाकात हो जाती है, will you be able to look at that person in the eye and look into that person's eye and meet them warmly based on what you said? That's a test I think we must start applying. But regardless of all that, I am willing to give the benefit of the doubt genuinely, and this applies to anyone who's criticized the book. I have no problems, I welcome it. My only position has been, be direct in your disagreement and be clear in your disagreement. When you wish to engage with another person in sincerity and with sincerity, और उस आइडिया पे अगर आपको शास्त्रार्थ करना है, तो एंगेजमेंट में एक सिविलिटी भी होना चाहिए और एक डायरेक्टनेस भी होना चाहिए। स्लाइक तरीके से अगर आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे, तो you end up wondering what is the motive here if he could have just simply said I disagree for so and so reasons. There's nothing wrong with it.
एक बार निकाल दिया तो
निकाल
मूव
दो।
ऑन करो यार।
And not just that, I think even the best of friends are entitled to critique and criticize each other's work, 100%, right? So I don't think that's going to affect me too much. So on that, I think maybe we have to revisit the terms of engagement on ideological issues and on such serious topics. अब एक है मतभेद, लेकिन उसको रखने का जो तरीका है वो भी अलग होना चाहिए, is my only considered position. Now coming to the actual issue, I think my understanding of decoloniality is as follows. आप पहले एक प्रॉब्लम के एग्जिस्टेंस को एक्नॉलेज करेंगे, और वो है कॉलोनियल कॉन्शियसनेस। और समझ लेते हैं दैट यू आर अ पर्सन हु इज इंटरेस्टेड इन एपिस्टेमोलॉजीज एज अपोज्ड टू फैक्ट्स। इफ दैट्स योर पोजीशन, तब भी आप फैक्ट्स को एक मिनट के लिए देख लीजिए, जहां पे वो बार बार कहे जा रहे हैं, एंड देयर ओन पोजीशंस क्लियरली शो दैट रेस एंड रिलीजन हैव बीन द कांस्टेंट ड्राइविंग फैक्टर्स in the way they've operated, in the way they have established the infrastructure in Bharat and elsewhere. How are we going to run away from this? And उसका सीधा असर अगर आपको दिख रहा है इस जनरेशन में, पिछले जनरेशन में, तो क्या इन दोनों डॉट्स को कनेक्ट करना इतना प्रॉब्लमैटिक है? इनका कॉन्डक्ट, so the conduct has a cause, and the conduct and the cause have a clear effect, which is an intended effect. How can you then run away from the fact that your basic dharana has been changed because of their investment in your soul, in your atma? That is very clear. So start with acknowledgement of the problem. The problem therefore is coloniality, is the basic position. अब वहां से आगे बढ़िए, ठीक है, आपने acknowledge कर लिया, अब क्या करेंगे? क्या हम ये कहने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं that you start glorifying a certain past and then bring it back fully? That's never been the argument. Decoloniality का basic ये position ये रहा है, colonizers' attacks on each of the colonized society has been with a common intention, but उसको implement करने का जो तरीका है अलग अलग रहा है। जिस सोसाइटी में कास्ट है उसको एक्सप्लॉइट करो, जिस सोसाइटी में कास्ट नहीं है, ट्राइब है, उसको एक्सप्लॉइट करो, या और हर जगह पे रेस का इस्तेमाल करो। दिस हैज बीन द कॉमन ट्रेडिशन। सो देयरफॉर you have to come out with your own individual indigenous response based on the impact and influence of coloniality on your society. तो आप वहां से शुरू करेंगे. तो भारत में रिलीजन में इंपैक्ट हुआ है, जाति में इंपैक्ट हुआ है, लैंग्वेज में इंपैक्ट हुआ है, वेशभूषा में हुआ है, खान पान में हुआ है, तो आप इसके बारे में बात करेंगे. एंड आई हैव सेड एज मच इन द बुक दैट आप जितना भी अपने पास्ट को रिक्लेम करने की कोशिश करेंगे पूरा तो नहीं आ सकता है. बट दिस इज नॉट एन अटेम्प्ट एट रिक्लेमिंग द पास्ट, इट इज एन अटेम्प्ट एट फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल हैविंग द राइट टू स्पीक अबाउट योर पास्ट इन अ मैनर दैट यू डीम फिट विदाउट बीइंग फेटर्ड बाय कॉलोनियल फिल्टर्स. आप अपने अतीत के बारे में बात करना चाहते हैं तो आप उनके मापदंडों को अपनाइए मत. यू स्पीक अबाउट योर सोसाइटी फर्स्ट, देन ये है पास्ट की बात. द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज फ्यूचर का क्या होगा, भविष्य का क्या होगा. The entire misunderstanding I think arrives from the assumption that you are asking for वर्णाश्रम धर्म को उसी फोर्स के साथ वापस लेके आओ. And everything that you think has been associated, like सती प्रथा, everything, फिर से इसको वापस लेके आओ. I don't think anybody is making those statements. ये आपके assumptions हैं. क्योंकि जब भी इन मुद्दों के बारे में डिस्कशन होता है, आपका ऑब्सेशन जाति से शुरू होता है और जाति पे खत्म होता है, वर्ण से शुरू होता है, वर्ण पे खत्म होता है. यू आर नॉट एबल टू लुक एट द पिक्चर बियॉन्ड दैट. चाहे वो संप्रदाय की बात हो, मंदिरों की बात हो, किसी भी चीज पे आप बात करना शुरू करें, यू स्टार्ट विद दैट. That fixation is so problematic, which means you have chosen a preconceived filter to look at the point, as opposed to just understanding the point for a moment. Breathe for a moment and just understand the point. Now there, what I have said, modernity का एक specific colonial history है, और उसको आप प्लीज एक बैज ऑफ ऑनर की तरह प्लीज इस्तेमाल मत कीजिए. एंड मॉडर्निटी को हर जगह पे थोपने की कोशिश मत कीजिए. रिप्लेस मॉडर्निटी विद रेलेवेंस, कंटेम्पररी रेलेवेंस. एक इंस्टीट्यूशन का या फिर एक प्रथा का या फिर एक संप्रदाय या पंथ का आज के डेट में क्या रेलेवेंस है, इसका सोशल फंक्शन क्या है, इसका रिलीजियस फंक्शन क्या है, वो सवाल आप पूछना शुरू कीजिए. यू डोंट ट्राई एंड से हम उनकी तरह कैसे बन सकते हैं, सो हाउ डू वी एलिवेट आवर स्टैंडर्ड्स. नो, दैट्स नॉट द डिस्कशन. नाउ, so therefore the comparison with Taliban in light of what I've just said is fundamentally problematic. तालिबान को लग सकता है that उनके वर्जन का decoloniality का मतलब ये होगा sex slavery and all of that, whereas our version of decoloniality is going to be extremely contextual based on us. Merely because decoloniality is applied by two societies, they won't necessarily land at the same conclusion because it depends on who you are as a fundamental society. इस्लामिक सोसाइटी का डीकोलोनियल अप्रोच अलग होगा, भारत का अलग होगा. नाउ देयर क्वेश्चन इज, गोइंग बाय योर लॉजिक, वो भी उसको जस्टिफाई कर लेंगे, आप भी इसको जस्टिफाई कर लेंगे, तो चाइल्ड मैरिज को कौन अबॉलिश करेगा, सेक्स स्लेवरी को कौन अबॉलिश करेगा. दैट्स वेयर आई बेसिकली सेड, इफ यू एम्प्लॉय अ डीकोलोनियल अप्रोच विद रेस्पेक्ट टू योर सोसाइटी, डज इट स्टॉप यू फ्रॉम टेलिंग देम जो आप कर रहे हैं वो गलत है हमारे नजरिए से, लेकिन लक्ष्मण रेखा कहां पे खींची जाएगी. Do you have the right to interfere with Afghanistan? Do you have the right to interfere with any other sovereign nation? That's the only question. Because their argument on the face of it veers in the direction that there must be an international body that has the ability to interfere with every society and there must be harmonious standards of civilization and culture across the board.
ये तो है, जब यूनिवर्सल एथिक्स और मोरालिटी की बात होती है.
Exactly the point, right? And students of ethics and students of political science and students of how jurisprudence has been formulated will tell you this very, very clearly that ये universal नहीं था, ये universalization था. There is difference between being universal and universalizing a particular experience. So therefore, assume for a moment हमें किसी एक प्रथा को किसी और जाति या फिर किसी और कल्चर में अगर हमें कहना है कि ये गलत है, the first thing that you will do is that let there be representation in a common body where you're able to discuss and say, this is where their position comes from, this is where our position comes from. Is there a way that we can do away with certain practices which are anachronistic and outdated? That discussion has never happened. My entire position has been that this is an imposed structure. We all speak of international law. कहाँ गया international law? यूक्रेन में तेल लेने गया है. What international law? There is no such thing as international law. Balance of power is the only international reality and nothing else. United Nations is a fundamentally spineless and useless body. League of Nations was even worse. Have they been able to prevent 2 world wars or the wars after that? How many wars have been undertaken purely on the basis of United Nations security resolutions? कुछ नहीं हुआ है. All these countries put together have not been able to stop one Russia. What have they been able to respond with? Sanctions.
वो तो पहले भी लगते
थे. क्या फर्क पड़ गया? क्या इंटरनेशनल लॉ की बात करते हैं आप? सो जो लोग हमें लेक्चर दिए जाते हैं और हमसे कह रहे हैं कि आप पोजीशन लो रशिया के बारे में, भारत चीन को झेल रहा है इतने सालों से, क्या पोजीशन लिया आप लोगों ने? Have your multinationals stopped investing in China after all of this? Is China not a human rights abuser? Has that stopped you from investing in them?
Much
Saudi
bigger
Arabia?
than
हाँ,
Russia.
Saudi Arabia भी है. China literally has concentration camps. When was the last time you heard of a gulag or a concentration camp in Russia? What are you talking about? You don't want to focus on China because you know that your business interests are tied there. So let us come out of this mythical, fictional nonsense in our head that there is something called as international standard. No, it doesn't exist. It is a Western standard that has been employed everywhere. तो जवाब क्या आता है? They have adopted a lot of practices. Westernization की बात होती है या modernization की बात होती है तो दो बात निकल आते हैं. First, to basically say modernity is not purely a Western construct. It is basically an amalgamation of multiple ideas that they have taken from multiple places. Then I think you have still not understood the point. The point is, the West adopts the Christian position or the Christian philosophy or strategy of digesting stuff from other cultures without giving credit for those aspects and then passes it off as its own. चाहे वो प्राणायाम के बारे में हो या फिर लेट्स से योगा के बारे में हो, what do you think is happening right now? Right now they will celebrate this as your contribution, but simultaneously their academia has started working to prove that इसका हिंदुइज्म से कोई लेना देना नहीं है, इसका भारत की संस्कृति से कोई लेना देना नहीं है. They've already started that. That is how the process of digestion starts. So the philosophy of this entire mindset is it absorbs without credit, appropriates it, Christianizes it and calls it as one of the contributions of the West.
Yoga ko breathing exercise.
Exactly. All of this, that's how it works. Right? That's one. Second, कभी कभार ये भी आर्ग्यूमेंट दिया जाता है that आप वेस्टर्न सोसाइटी में अभी तक आप रहे नहीं हैं. हम लोग अमेरिका में रह के आ चुके हैं भाई. We've lived there. You know how America operates? You know how the society works there? The state and the society can't be compared. Here's the problem.
और वो क्रिश्चियन नहीं है.
वो क्रिश्चियन नहीं है. They've become secular. Here's the problem then. You still don't understand the point. The state from the West or its churches have not changed their mindsets. Here's a simple question. Has the secular mindset in America managed to create a secular administration either from the Democratic side or the Republican side? No. Both of them are expected to prove their Christian credentials. Both of them have to show their Sunday church going, let's say patterns, habits. ये इनको बताने पड़ेंगे. तब तक तो वो change नहीं हुआ है. I am not denying the fact that there is a significant degree of secularization in terms of becoming irreligious in Western societies. चाहे वो यूरोप हो या US में हो रहा है. I don't deny that.
और उसके परिणाम भी आ रहे हैं ना.
Exactly the point. The point is that today you're not able to withstand any resistance. I strongly believe that America today and its inability to react to Russia is significantly a consequence of its own loss of identity. यूरोप तो पहले खो चुका है, अब अमेरिका की बारी है. That's exactly what is happening. And two, the state or the military industrial establishment of the West has not changed its mindset. It continues the same way it is. So the entire point of, let's say, colonization is how they operate from a statist perspective, not just from a society perspective. वो जब तक change नहीं होता है, it is a reality for us to deal with. I'll give you a simple example. Why has UK released a report on persecution of Christian minorities and other religious minorities in Bharat? अभी ये रेजोल्यूशन या फिर एक डिस्कशन हो रहा है उनके पार्लियामेंट में. क्यों हो रहा है भाई? ये इसमें आपको coloniality नजर नहीं आ रहा है? तो तब इनका आर्ग्यूमेंट ये होता है, you are introducing critical race and religion theory, which is worse than the CRT. Look at the impact of CRT in the West. No. Again, you're wrong. Why? The West is having a problem with CRT because as opposed to focusing on what happened, children are being told that you must use CRT to hate their immediate students and neighbors and everybody else. That is different from acknowledging that something happened which had a racial tone to it or let's say a religious tone to it. Second, एक बात के लिए मान भी लेते हैं कि अमेरिका में जो हो रहा है वो गलत हो रहा है. Are you serious that you don't want to acknowledge the race-driven and religion-inspired colonialism which happened in Bharat? Are you going to use the American example to deny your own experience? That's where I seriously question the absence or presence of originality. Why don't you take a look at what has happened here and all these facts, all these debates which are India-centric, all these activities which are India-centric. In the book, what have I done? Every chapter is a picture. And in one particular chapter, I've shown the number of churches that were established across the country around the same period. किस लिए establish हो रहे थे? धर्म परिवर्तन और colonialism में या फिर उपनिवेशवाद में या उपनिवेशिकता में जो गहरा संबंध है, ये आप समझना नहीं चाहते हैं. Maybe because you have lived in the West, it's having an impact on you.
दूसरा एक जो ऑब्जेक्शन था
जी.
वो ये था कि अब जब डीकोलोनियलिटी की बात करते हैं तो हम भारतीयता की बात करते हैं, कोई कहीं दूसरे कल्चर की बात करेगा, तो इन सब में ग्रुप राइट्स या ग्रुप कॉन्शियसनेस वो आ जाता है. तो मेरा इंडिविजुअल का क्या, ये तो आप इंडिविजुअलिटी को ही आप नकार रहे हो.
करेक्ट.
तो ये इसका क्या रिस्पॉन्स है?
आई थिंक आई थिंक पी गुरुज के पॉडकास्ट में Mr. Abhijit Iyer Mitra had made a point in response to a question about what I've said about individual rights. I don't think he's right, because I don't think he's understood the point. But most importantly, I hope he reads the Constitution on this particular point. If you look at how individual rights are vested in Part 3, it starts with a subject to clause. Subject to public morality, order and health, and other provisions of the Constitution, you shall be guaranteed these rights, so and so, so and so. संविधान इस मुद्दे से शुरू करता है कि इंडिविजुअल का राइट जो है, it is subject to these restrictions, which are all public restrictions and societal restrictions and public morality based restrictions. Okay, this is the basic position of the Constitution. What have I said in the book which is different? In fact, in the book, exactly what I've said is, civilizational perspective से देखेंगे या फिर even constitutional perspective से देखेंगे, individual rights का महत्व है. But when it runs against or it is at loggerheads with certain group rights, तब आपको trade off करना पड़ेगा. एक balance test it immediately evolves. No, but I understand where perhaps his concerns could come from, and I think these are legitimate concerns. Going by that logic, if 90% of the society believes that LGBTQ should not have any rights, तब क्या होगा? तब individual rights का क्या होगा? I will say then you have to look at it slightly differently. Members of the LGBTQ are also a group. So it's no more just an individual versus a group. It's a group versus a group. And the question of the balance test that the court asks itself is, these people too are entitled to dignity just as anybody else. And what is the harm being caused to anybody else, as long as this is between consenting adults? And this is happening within the four corners of a bedroom or whatever it is. Who are you to question this? That is how a balance test is evolved. So my point in the book has been primarily informed by what kind of experiences? Sabarimala, or let's say conversion, religious angles, where an individual effectively says, I now believe that this is how dharma is supposed to be defined, and this is how an institution must be operated on the basis of, and I will sit and change this by violating existing systems. When you do that, then the members of the community and the institution also have rights under Article 26. So my point is informed by a conflict between an individual right under Article 25 and an institutional right under Article 26. First of all, Article 25 के अंदर ही limitations हैं society के basis पे. उसके अलावा institution के rights हैं under Article 26. अब हिजाब के केस में आप ले लीजिए. Judgment after judgment after judgment from Bombay High Court and Kerala High Court, everybody has said that when it comes to an institution, the individual's right shall always be subservient to an institution. ये हिजाब के सिलसिले में 2 बार कह रखा है. 2016 में केरला ने कहा है, then Bombay High Court has said this. All of these have said this. So the Constitution has already taken this position, because that's how it works in every society which subscribes to the concept of a democracy, which is greater good. So I haven't said anything which is either unconstitutional or which is fascist in nature, where I say finish all individual rights. No, I'm not saying that. Certain specific circumstances and certain specific forms of institutions will prevail over the individual. That's why I think it's important to understand that entire thing from a certain context. लेकिन अगर at the outset आपका entire problem decoloniality के साथ है, तो मुझे I'm not surprised that you also have a problem with the parts. If you have a problem with the whole, it's difficult for me to expect you to have some kind of, let's say, an open approach to the parts within the whole. But that's okay. Again, I do not have a problem with people criticizing it. This is my clarification that you have misread that portion. And you should have at least read the Constitution before arriving at the conclusion that no, this is deeply problematic, because the Constitution already takes that certain position. There are multiple judgments to say this. The language of these provisions are crystal clear, that these rights are circumscribed by group rights.
आपने हिजब की बात की, जब ये पूरा कंट्रोवर्सी हुआ
जी,
तो इसमें ये बात हुई कि हिजब को अलाउ करना चाहिए या नहीं करना चाहिए। उसमें एक बात आई थी कि इंस्टीट्यूशन का जो राइट है,
जी,
अगर वो कोई पास कर रहा है जजमेंट या ऑर्डर उसने पास किया है, तो उसका इंडिविजुअल राइट वहाँ पे मैटर नहीं करेगा।
राइट।
लेकिन अगर डी कॉलोनियल अप्रोच हम लें,
जी,
दैट इज रादर देन सेक्युलर अप्रोच,
जी,
कि सब लोगों को एक ही यूनिफॉर्म पहनना है,
जी,
इसमें गलत क्या है कि लोगों को हिजब, बुर्का तो बिल्कुल अलाउ नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि इट
Correct.
चेंजेस फंडामेंटली द यूनिफॉर्म इटसेल्फ, देयर
Correct,
इज नो
correct.
कंसेप्ट ऑफ
And
यूनिफॉर्म।
I need to see the identity.
बिल्कुल।
Correct.
लेकिन हिजब इज जस्ट अ स्कार्फ।
Right.
उसी तरीके से जो हिंदू सिंबल्स हैं
जी।
वो भी लोग पहन सकते हैं।
Correct.
तो इसमें थोड़ा सा मॉडिफिकेशन है यूनिफॉर्म में, ओवर एंड
Right.
अबव द यूनिफॉर्म।
Correct. Correct.
तो इनमें अलाउ करने में दिक्कत क्या है? किसी भी इंस्टीट्यूशन को
Correct.
ये हक नहीं होना चाहिए कि वो सेक्युलराइज करे किसी के भी रिलीजियस स्पेस को,
Correct. Correct.
इवन इन स्कूल।
Correct. So I think प्रॉब्लम ये हुआ है कि इस पूरे कंट्रोवर्सी में बाउंड्री कंडीशंस क्या हैं, किस बैकड्रॉप में ये लड़ा जा रहा है, किसी को समझ में नहीं आ रहा है। ओके, सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल लेट्स बी वेरी क्लियर। मुद्दा शुरू हुआ था विद रिस्पेक्ट टू सर्टेन इंस्टीट्यूशंस इन उडुपी।
एक तो ये बात है ना कि जब ये जो डिबेट्स होनी चाहिए ना
जी।
इन आइसोलेशन,
जी,
तो उनका आंसर अलग आएगा।
एग्जैक्टली।
ये बात है दिक्कत। ये
सो हमने पूरे स्कोप ऑफ एनालिसिस को बहुत बड़ा कर दिया है व्हेन इट डजंट वारंट इट एट ऑल। इशू कहां से शुरू हुआ था? इन स्पेसिफिक इंस्टीट्यूशंस इन उडुपी ये रूल था, चाहे कोई भी हो, आप अपने रिलीजियस सिंबल्स को, विजिबल रिलीजियस सिंबल्स को पहन के नहीं आएंगे। ये यूनिफॉर्मली अप्लाई हो रहा था। नाउ इसके देयर आर टू वेज ऑफ लुकिंग एट दिस। वन इज टू से व्हाई डू वी नीड सच अ रूल इन द फर्स्ट प्लेस? आई एम कंप्लीटली विथ यू ऑन दैट फ्रंट। अगर ये रूल ना होता और सबको ये छूट दिया जाता कि आप पहन के आओ, ऑनेस्टली स्पीकिंग आई डोंट सी अ प्रॉब्लम। As someone who wears a tika on a regular basis, I wouldn't have a problem. I would accept it and I would love it. Okay, that's one. Second, situation दूसरा है। अभी रूल है और सभी पे लागू हो रहा है, किसी एक पक्ष पे सिर्फ अकेले लागू नहीं हो रहा है। तब आप ये कहते हैं कि सिर्फ हम ये कर सकते हैं, या फिर हम ये करना चाहते हैं, या फिर हम इसको वायलेट करेंगे। तब क्वेश्चन ये उठेगा, इतने सालों से तो ये प्रॉब्लम नहीं हुआ था, तो अचानक से ये कैसे शुरू हो रहा है? दिसंबर 2021 तक ये मुद्दा था ही नहीं, एंड द रूल हैज बीन सिंस 1995। ना आपने उसको चैलेंज किया, ना उसके अमल करने के तरीके को आपने चैलेंज किया है। तो अचानक से अगर कुछ हो रहा है, देन इट गोज इन अ स्लाइटली डिफरेंट डायरेक्शन कि ये थोड़ा मैन्युफैक्चर है। बट लेट अस स्टिक टू आपका जो लार्जर क्वेश्चन, फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपल्स। नो, आई डोंट सी अ प्रॉब्लम। भारत जैसे देश में जहां पे रिलीजन का इतना स्ट्रांग रोल है, चाहे किसी का भी रिलीजन हो, ये करने की जरूरत नहीं है। हम फ्रांस नहीं है। वी आर नॉट irreligious in that particular sense. The society has imposed upon itself the secular fiction. The state has imposed upon it a secular fiction. The society is not a secular society. It is a religious society with maybe certain secular islands. Unfortunately, हमने स्टेट और सोसाइटी के बीच का डिस्टिंक्शन सेक्युलरिज्म के नजरिए से ठीक से समझा नहीं है। Secularism is a requirement of the state, not the society. So when someone says India is a secular country, you are wrong. Indian state is a secular state. Indian society is not a secular society.
और इतना बुरा हाल है कि जैसे जो एक केस हुआ था जिसमें माइनॉरिटी इंस्टीट्यूशन था, तो वहाँ पे क्या होता है कि वहाँ पे जो माइनॉरिटी इंस्टीट्यूशन है उसका राइट हायर पेडेस्टल पे है,
करेक्ट,
रादर देन द इंडिविजुअल,
राइट।
लेकिन अगर वही नॉन माइनॉरिटी इंस्टीट्यूशन होता तो वहाँ पे जो इंडिविजुअल का राइट है वो आ जाता, अगर प्राइवेट इंस्टीट्यूशन है।
लेकिन ये हमारी गलती है।
बिल्कुल, आर्टिकल 30
100%। See, according to me, nobody has stopped you from establishing Hindu specific institutions. आप करो, okay, that's one. Two, Christian minorities and Muslim minorities for that matter, or even linguistic minorities, have the right to impose their rules within their institutions. आपको अगर तकलीफ है, don't go to those schools. Why are you sending your children to those schools? You're only worried about protecting their external symbols. दिमाग के अंदर क्या हो रहा है वहां पे? I'm surprised that you're insisting only on the visible aspects. बट जो अंतःकरण से जो बदल रहा है उस पे आपको कोई नजर, आई मीन यूर नेवर इवन इंटेंट ऑन फोकसिंग ऑन दैट। द लार्जर प्रॉब्लम इज दैट, नो, बट यू आर हैप्पी टू सेंड देम, बट विद द टीका। क्या करेंगे? वंस द एजुकेशन इज डन, बच्चा अपने आप टीका हटा देगा। किसी को हटाने की जरूरत नहीं है।
वही तो
बाय द टाइम ही कम्स आउट ऑफ द इंस्टीट्यूशन, ये बोलेगा मेरे धर्म में क्या है, सती है, जाति है, and let's say untouchability hai. That's it. He will come out saying this thing. Look at the myopia of our issues. You're still focusing only on what they call the zahir, which is external, as opposed to what is happening inside. So, in this debate, I think, once again, Hindus have established how they have bought into this myth of secularism.
इसलिए तो मेरे को बहुत आश्चर्य हुआ कि यार तुम लड़ रहे हो कि ये इनको बुर्का पहन के या ये करके क्यों आने दे रहे हैं, बल्कि जो इतना बड़ा इशू है कि जो माइनॉरिटी इंस्टीट्यूशन है और नॉन माइनॉरिटी इंस्टीट्यूशन है वो एक पेडेस्टल पे नहीं है.
Exactly.
तुम अपने स्कूल नहीं चला सकते हो उन रूल्स के हिसाब से.
See, my position in public so far has been very consistent. ये एक गवर्नमेंट फंडेड स्कूल है जहां पे एक सेक्युलर रूल है तो सब पे लागू होगा. लेकिन अगर मुझसे फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपल्स पे बात किया जाए, मैं कहूंगा भैया सबको करने दो. व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस? ओके. एंड मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली आई टेल द हिंदू कम्युनिटी, तुम इस पे मत लड़ो, तुम अपने इंस्टीट्यूशन सेटअप करो. एंड बच्चों को कहो कि ये पहन के जाओ. बिल्कुल 100%. Don't take pride in the fact that you're sending your children without any religious symbol outside.
हाँ, ये तो pride
ये shame है. And understand that this entire episode has proved that the children of the other community are very clear about their priorities in terms of protecting their identity. Whereas you people have effectively failed to instill that basic filter in your own children.
हिंदुओं को तो अपना हिंदुत्व या हिंदुइज्म तभी चमकता है ना जब दूसरे को बुर्का पहन के देखते हैं, या वो तब निकल के आता है कि ये क्यों पहने, हमको भी करना चाहिए. अरे किसने रोका? करो भाई.
Exactly. Your sense of identity and your sense of originality, the fetters are self-imposed. बाहर से जितना आपको लगता है हो रहा है, नो प्रॉब्लम. लेकिन पहले आप अंदर से तो बदलो. उसके बाद you talk about all these aspects. You're constantly looking for everyone else to blame the problem for, as opposed to yourself.
अभी कल पंजाब चुनाव का नतीजा आने वाला है, जिसमें मैं 2 इश्यूज बात करना चाहता था. एक पंजाब पे, एक दूसरे मुद्दे पे, क्योंकि बहुत समय बीत गया है जब आप आए नहीं. तो ये बहुत पहले ही हमको बात करनी थी. जब तक ये वीडियो आएगा तब तक पता चल जाएगा कौन जीतेगा कौन नहीं. लेकिन वो एक इरेलीवेंट है मेरे हिसाब से, क्योंकि समाज जिस स्तर पर पहुंचा है वहाँ पे हमने देखा कि किस तरीके से बेअदबी के नाम पे, ब्लास्फेमी के नाम पे लोगों की हत्या हुई. तो कुछ लोगों का कहना था कि ये तो अनसिविलाइज्ड, मॉडर्न नहीं है ये एस्पेक्ट, तो इसको कैसे कर सकते हैं. कुछ लोग ट्विटर पे बोल रहे थे कि देव निंदा गलत बात है, नहीं करना चाहिए, उसकी पनिशमेंट होनी चाहिए. ऑफ कोर्स कोई ये नहीं कह रहा है कि डेथ उसका पनिशमेंट होना चाहिए, लेकिन देयर शुड नॉट बी ओपन, किसी को भी कुछ भी बोलने का अधिकार हो. वहाँ पे भी पब्लिक मोरालिटी वाली बात आ जाती है. तो उस परिप्रेक्ष्य में आपका क्या मत है कि ब्लास्फेमी जो है, चाहे वो किसी भी धर्म की हो या सेक्युलर स्टेट में तो किसी भी धर्म की हो तो उसके हिसाब से देखना पड़ेगा, लेकिन अगर हिंदू स्टेट हो तो वहाँ पे भी क्या डिफरेंस रहेगा, तो उसके ऊपर थोड़ा बताइए.
I'll give you my tentative thoughts because I don't think I've fully formulated my opinion on this. So first of all, पंजाब में जो हुआ था, apart from what happened in that particular incident, एक दरार डालने की कोशिश तो है between धार्मिक पंथ एंड द सिख पंथ. तो उस नजरिए से अगर आप देखते हैं, then it's a seriously problematic situation. I sincerely hope we are not back to the 1980s. I genuinely hope that's not the situation. For one, because notwithstanding whatever the history may be and all that, I still see the Sikh Panth as part of the larger Panth, or the larger Hindu Sampradaya, simply because the constitution also says so. That's the reason why they're treated as even Hindus for that matter. The explanation to... Legal. Yes, and under Article 25, the explanation specifically speaks of who constitute Hindus. Chahe wo Sikh ho, Baudh ho, Jain ho, they're all treated as Hindus, right? Now, if that is the case, ये दरार पड़नी नहीं चाहिए. लेकिन fine, they have certain rules of what is to be respected and what is not. One is, why couldn't, when exhortations are made to the Hindu community that you should allow the law to take over the process, why was that not observed? Who stops you from immediately reporting? That's one thing. But there's the other angle. Has the Hindu community grown too soft when it comes to these matters, that it expects the same softness from others? Have you moved away from your roots so much that the roots don't matter, that you expect the same softness from others? So for instance, पिछले 3 दिनों से, based on what I've said very clearly about Dr. Ambedkar in very crystal clear terms, some people have said, how can you condone someone who's committed Dev Ninda? I'm not saying that you should condone that person. I've never said condone those aspects. I am saying that he will not be a drishtant under any circumstances as far as these aspects are concerned, simply because he himself has accepted in quite a few places that he lacks the traditional training, either in Sanskrit as a language or in the Vedas for that particular matter. Therefore, all that he has said is based on anecdotal experience or personal experience to some extent, which he has decided to extrapolate to the rest of the society. Therefore, I have very clear disagreements on that particular front. Now, when it comes to the larger question of Dev Ninda and blasphemy, if it's a secular state, either everybody reserves the right to employ blasphemy as a technique to shut the other side up, and which is why if you look at 295A, it is effectively applicable across the board. But I don't think it's a question of uniform application of the law that is at issue. There are extra state street vetoes that are at play, and that cannot be addressed unless the state decides to crack upon those people who take the law into their own hands, which the Indian state has traditionally proved to be uncomfortable with and incompetent for. It's a soft state in that particular sense. It has serious religious considerations which are always tentatively tilted against the Hindus.
तो यहाँ पे भी तो दिक्कत तो वही है ना, हिंदू समाज की ही है.
हिंदू समाज की ही है. तो देखिए, what are the realities that we are dealing with? सरकार किसी की भी हो, जब ब्लास्फेमी का इशू आ जाता है, वहां पे थोड़ा बहुत पक्षपात होता है, जहां पे any blasphemy committed against Hindu faith systems is taken less seriously. That's one, either by the media or by the state, and now to a significant extent even by the community itself. And two, the community is unable to generate any solutions at this point which are beyond the state. I'm not saying illegal or unconstitutional, but what are those valid options that you can have to say, we will not deal with a certain person who constantly runs down our gods and our deities? What is the social mechanism that you can come out with? So I think these are aspects, maybe history will give you some inspiration in this particular regard as to whether you wish to engage with that person or not, who chooses to insult your faith as well as your deities. तो वहां पे थोड़ा देखना पड़ेगा. अगर ये हिंदू स्टेट होगा, अगर ये हिंदू राष्ट्र बन जाता है, then I'd say I'm sorry, there are two fetters. One, your ability to take a pot shot at my faith system will obviously be limited to a significant extent. Second, any faith or any creed of your faith system that has the impact of running down my faith system, or it poses an existential threat to my existence, to be repetitive in that particular regard, will have to be tested, will have to be examined. At the outset, अगर आपका ये पोजीशन ये है कि मेरा जीना ही हराम है, ओके, तो मुझे तो सवाल 2-3 करने पड़ेंगे ना. भाई ये ऐसा कैसा सिस्टम है, और इसको आप इसको भी खुली छूट दोगे और मुझे भी खुली छूट दोगे, then how will we survive? It can't be a situation where the predator and the prey are said to have equal rights under the constitution, because then it's not equal, it's unequal.
क्योंकि ये तो सत्य है कि सब पंथ बराबर तो नहीं है, नहीं
ये
तो मानना पड़ेगा,
उनकी सोच में तो नहीं है.
दूसरा जो विषय था वो था मैरिटल रेप का.
जी.
क्योंकि अभी आप उस केस को लड़ भी रहे थे, तो अभी रिजर्व हो गया है जजमेंट, तो उस पर आप बोल सकते हो. इसको कैसे देखते हो कि एक ये इशू है, और भी इश्यूज हैं जो हम बाहर के सोसाइटी का देख के वो करते हैं, और इसको मतलब इसमें क्या होता है कि कोई भी इसके खिलाफ बोलता है कि ऐसा, हमको थोड़ा रुक जाओ भाई, आराम से एक बार सोच लो, तो उसको ये क्या है कि यार तुम तो मतलब रेप के, मैरिटल रेप के मतलब सपोर्ट कर रहे हो. तो इस तरीके की बातें आती हैं. आपका रिप्रेजेंटेशन जो है वो क्या रहा?
तो जब तक जजमेंट नहीं आता है, आई विल ट्राई एंड बी वेरी वेरी मेजर्ड इन व्हाट आई सेड. टू, because the attacks on my legal submissions as a lawyer still continue from certain institutions like St. Stephen's में जब ये cancel culture भी हुआ था, या
उसके बारे में लास्ट में
इसी के बारे में हुआ था. I don't think उन बच्चों ने इसके बारे में पढ़ा भी है कि written submissions तो it's out in the public domain, एक बार पढ़ तो लेते. I don't think they've done it, but it's okay, बच्चे हैं. Now
बच्चे नहीं है
लेकिन बिहेवियर तो बच्चों जैसा ही है, क्या करें.
कौन सी मत शौर्य.
So Rathor. So my point is, I don't think the issue of spousal sexual violence is a small issue. कभी ये पोजीशन नहीं लिया गया है कि इसको क्रिमिनलाइज नहीं किया जाना चाहिए। मुद्दा सिर्फ यही है कि जुडिशरी कैसे क्रिमिनलाइज कर सकती है, ये लेजिस्लेचर का काम है। जुडिशरी कैन नॉट क्रिएट एन ऑफेंस, इट कैन एट बेस्ट डिसमेंटल एन ऑफेंस टू से दैट इट्स अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल, राइट? Judiciary can remove restrictions, it can't create restrictions. Penalization is completely outside the scope of judicial power, and several judgments have said so. Supreme Court has categorically said this. Not just that Article 246 clearly says that the power to legislate with respect to criminal laws is effectively with the state or the union legislature. So I certainly believe that ये एक सबसे पहला मुद्दा है, because अगर ये हो जाता है, independent of the marital rape issue, you have effectively created an institution, a judicial organ, which can create offenses. Look at the larger picture there. तो वो एक issue है. That has been the position or submission in court. Second thing ये है that spousal sexual violence or sexual violence within a marriage or marriage-like relationships and between strangers, इसको equate करना बहुत ही मुश्किल हो जाता है from an evidentiary perspective. Because it's not to say that just because you happen to be a husband, you have the consent to have sex without even asking or without the other person's dignity or let's say consent being taken. That's not the position. ये बिल्कुल position नहीं है. In fact, the organization that I represented clearly says so. ये हमने कहा ही नहीं है. In fact, they've asked for gender neutral laws. On the other hand, the other side is asking for gender specific laws. Surprisingly, a men's right organization is asking for gender neutral laws, whereas the other side is, which calls for equality, is asking for gender specific laws. Anyways, so the point has been that evidentiary standards इसमें बहुत ही important हो जाते हैं, because how do you establish that when there is no witness, hopefully, and when okay, और CCTV कैमरा नहीं है, या फिर आपने so there is this character called Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory, जिनका relationship agreement होता है. तो relationship agreement में आके आप ये लिखेंगे कि mating का ये step होगा, courtship का ये step होगा, ना ये माना जाएगा. ये these are matters of intimacy. So what do you look for? Typically, what do legislations or let's say other jurisdictions look for? There must be some semblance of a tanav in the relationship. Legal separation हो जाए या फिर de facto separation हो जाए कि आप एक ही छत के नीचे हैं लेकिन फिर भी आप एक दूसरे के साथ नहीं हैं. ऐसा कुछ तो proof हो जाए. Then it becomes easier to establish that. तो उनके provisions already हैं. So if you look at section 376B of the IPC, it specifically speaks of sexual intercourse without consent between a couple which is separated. Either legally or otherwise. Okay, ये भी है. So our point is already criminalization है. उसके अलावा sexual cruelty is problematic under 498A. It's prohibited under that.
Domestic violence?
No. So domestic violence is under the DV Act of 2005. Okay. 498 of IPC speaks of sexual cruelty, includes sexual cruelty. Domestic violence includes sexual abuse. Okay. Under section 3 of the DV Act of 2005. So इतने सारे provisions हैं. Okay. So when this happens, how do you establish? They'll say, so you go by injury marks to say that ऐसा हुआ है. Okay. आज के डेट में क्या natural sex या unnatural sex है, इसका कोई definition है? No. In the age of sexual liberation, you don't even know what you're talking about. I'll give you a simple example, legal example. 375 जो provision है, जो rape को define करता है, उसकी परिभाषा है, उसके दो भाग हैं. One that defines what is sexual intercourse, A to D. And the other that defines what are the circumstances in which this sexual intercourse will become rape. Okay. तो intercourse का एक definition है, और वो तब तक रेप नहीं होता है जब तक ये इन 7 कंडीशंस में किसी एक कंडीशन को सेटिस्फाई नहीं कर देता है. तो 1 मिनट के लिए आप इन 7 कंडीशंस को हटा दीजिए. इसका मतलब ये है दैट नॉर्मल सेक्सुअल इंटरकोर्स इंक्लूड्स एवरीथिंग दैट इज कवर्ड फ्रॉम A to D. It speaks of anal sex. It speaks of urethral penetration. Everything. Imagine all of this is not under 377, which is unnatural sex or against the order of nature. ऐसा नहीं है. So if that is the case, in a moment of passion or a heat of passion, you get a hickey or there are marks, there are scratch marks. किसके बेसिस पे आप प्रूव करेंगे कि ये रेप था? कैसे प्रूव करेंगे आप? It will become a situation of abuse. And the best part or the worst part is, high courts and Supreme Courts have recognized that how 498A has been abused and how even false rape allegations have been leveled. ये आज की स्थिति है जिसमें सोच की जरूरत है, और आप उसको और भी कॉम्प्लिकेट करेंगे या कॉम्पाउंड करेंगे by effectively adding marital rape to this particular mix without creating safeguards. वहां पे जितनी डिग्निटी की बात है यहां पे भी ऐसा ही है. अगर आपने किसी पे लांछन लगा दिया या फिर ये इल्जाम लगा दिया, बाद में प्रूव हो, गलत हो, कुछ भी हो, नाम तो लग गया ना. अगेन आई रिपीट, एक तो criminalization already है. The simple issue has been rape is typically an act which is seen as an act between strangers. But एक spouse relationship या spouse like relationship या even for that matter live in relationships में आप उसको सीधा इस मापदंड को यहाँ पे अपना नहीं सकते. It's been the only limited position. उससे ज्यादा किसी ने ये नहीं कहा है. Nobody has taken the patriarchal toxic masculine position that men have the right to impose themselves on women. No, not done. In fact, we have said this in written submissions that marriage is a two-way street where dignity works both ways, consent works both ways. So I think the assumption that there can't be a different opinion on this, which is not against women's rights, is a deeply problematic aspect of our gender discourse today. आपका ओपिनियन भी नहीं हो सकता है, आप मुंह खोल भी नहीं सकते हैं, आपका बोलना ही हमारे खिलाफ हो जाता है, तो फिर बात क्या करें? इट कांट बी चिट भी मेरी पट भी मेरी, नो.
वैसे लगता क्या है कि इस तरीके के जो प्रयास होते रहते हैं, कहीं ना कहीं जो मैरिज है वो उसका जो इंस्टीट्यूशन है उसको कहीं ना कहीं कमज़ोर भी करने के प्रयास हैं.
देखिए उस तरफ के पेटिशनर्स हैं एंड आई थिंक आई डोंट वांट टू कमेंट ऑन तार कहाँ से जुड़ रहे हैं एंड ऑल दैट. आई डोंट नो. आई विल गो ऑन अ गुड फेथ बेसिस कि जो पेटिशंस फाइल हुए हैं, while I disagree with what they've asked for, they've been filed on a good faith basis. I can't comment on those aspects at this stage and I don't think it would be right.
सेंट स्टीफन्स का भी केस हुआ, ये आखिरी प्रश्न रहेगा क्योंकि बहुत समय हो गया, आपको जाना भी है, पुस्तक लिखनी है. तो सेंट स्टीफन्स का जो केस हुआ उसके बाद ये जो कैंसिल कल्चर जो आ रहा है
जी,
जिस तरीके के लांछन लगे कि आप तो ये मैरिटल रेप को डिफेंड कर रहे हो,
सबरीमाला को डिफेंड कर रहे हो, 370 को डिफेंड कर रहे हो,
पैट्रियार्कल और
सीए को डिफेंड कर रहे हो,
लेबल्स लगाना, वोकरी जो है जो आ रही है, लॉक स्टॉक एंड बैरल फ्रॉम यूएस एकेडमिया इनटू इंडियन यूनिवर्सिटीज. हाउ डू यू सी दैट?
So I think it's very important to recognize in the facts of this case हुआ क्या है. मैं आपको I'll say this without offending the students, but I'm sure they'll take offense to everything that I say. They have been at the receiving end of flack from their own colleagues within St. Stephen's.
अच्छा.
हाँ. A lot of Christian students themselves have written about this group which is called for this cancel or this cancellation, saying he has given you an opportunity to confront him, and the very first time you get such an opportunity, आपने पलायन कर दिया. You want to fight against injustice everywhere, and the one time you get an opportunity to confront him on his points, you gave it up. In fact, I think one of the comments effectively said that इनके इंस्टा के पेज में ये सब हो रहा था जब इन्होंने अपना ये सारा पोस्ट डाल दिया था, और मैंने कहा आप क्यों चिंता करते हैं, मैं सबको बता देता हूँ कि आपने यही कहा है. और भी बड़ा मेगाफोन है, मैं डाल देता हूँ, लोगों को पता तो चले कि आपने कहा है. Why are you worrying about lack of an audience? I'll create an audience for you. So I put it out, and they're basically saying that as far as Mr. Sai Deepak is concerned, some of us don't like him. But as much as we don't like him, how did you deprive him of an opportunity to represent himself and defend himself? He was coming for an interactive session. And no restrictions were put on who can ask questions. In fact, मैंने ये भी कहा था scripted नहीं होगा किसी भी हालत में. In fact, even they didn't ask for it. I said, just make sure that you don't filter the moderation process in such a way that I get only comfortable questions. पूछने दो भाई, मेरे पास जवाब है तो है, अगर नहीं है I'll take it on my chin like an adult and I'll move out. I don't have a problem, but I'll subject myself to the scrutiny. So I think there is a wonderful churn going on even within St. Stephen's. So I will be very careful before branding that entire institution or all the students there. जिन्होंने मुझे इनविटेशन दिया था, उनके अलावा भी लोग थे जिन्होंने कहा कि ऐसा आपको बार नहीं करना चाहिए था, आपको प्रोहिबिट नहीं करना चाहिए था. सो आई थिंक देयर इज अ प्रॉब्लम विद अ पर्टिकुलर ग्रुप in their attitude towards free speech while celebrating free speech. But the best part is, it shows a fantastic churn in the student community. That there are people who don't like me or watching and still asking questions, and who still believe that I have the right to an audience of a hearing. Good. I'm happy that there are students, whether or not they like me, who think on these lines. That's exactly what we've been asking for. Talk, debate, proof. Shastrat ho jaye. No problem. And then, of course, ये हंसराज में अभी जो हुआ था is proof of the fact that the student community is extremely alive to this, and they're saying we will not tolerate this kind of fascism anymore.
हंसराज में भी प्रोटेस्ट हुआ कुछ?
हाँ हुआ था. Apparently, जब मेरा टॉक चल रहा था, our comrades from the left were shouting outside the auditorium, basically saying, I don't know what, maybe there were casteist slurs, या फिर masculinity slurs, I don't know what it is, or या फिर as usual, Sangi, Manuvadi, the usual stuff. And I think they were responded to also in the same language. And the students effectively said, we will not allow you to spoil this event under any circumstances. क्योंकि मैंने ये भी कहा था, opening of the video, audio ठीक से नहीं आया, लेकिन उसमें आप सुनेंगे तो आपको पता चलेगा, मैंने कहा है, those who dislike me will be given the first right of asking questions. मैंने बोल दिया था. And I didn't say that, I also said this is not a sly way of identifying who hates me. No, I have taken a word from the student organizers that you will not be persecuted, you will not be harmed in any circumstances, you will be allowed to ask your questions freely. This is your chance, come after me. मैंने बोल दिया था. As usual, they chose to stay outside and shout as opposed to confronting me. So बहुत confidence है इनमें मुझसे debate करने का. So that's all I can say.
आखिरी में जाते जाते
जी
आप बता दीजिए कब तक नई पुस्तक दूसरा भाग आ जाएगा लोगों के हाथ में.
तो अभी जो है almost 50% of the book is done. I hope to complete it in the next 1.5 months. लेकिन उसके बाद कॉपी एडिटिंग में थोड़ा वक्त लगेगा. तो मुझे लगता है कि और इसको आप 2-3 months दीजिए, एटलीस्ट 3 months दीजिए, हो जाना चाहिए. Depends on a lot of other factors, cover design, pre-order, pre-release links and all that. But around the same time as the book was released the last year, around the same period. So tentatively you're looking at July, August.
75 साल आज़ादी का महोत्सव. चलिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर आने के लिए. एंड विश यू ऑल द बेस्ट फॉर द नेक्स्ट बुक. और अभी हम आपको डिस्टर्ब नहीं करेंगे अगले 2 महीने तक, तो आप आराम से लिख सकते हैं. थैंक यू सो मच.
धन्यवाद.